Part 9. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, Return Captain. Chapter 81. Captain, it's been 2 days, and there is still no news. On the deck, looking at Arthur's back, Rita walked over with a smile and put her hands on his shoulders. It's a bit slow, could I have guessed wrong? Arthur rubbed his chin with his fingers and thought slightly, looking at Mei on the side. Mei, could you have done it too hard before, and they are still unconscious? At that time, Arthur saw the scene very clearly, slashing and thundering. I'm afraid that ordinary people can't wake up so easily. Captain, rest assured, it only takes a day to wake up from an injury of that magnitude, and it may take a little longer to heal. Mei is quite confident in her own proportions. Well, well. Arthur sighed. If Doflamingo really refused this cooperation, it would be a loss for both parties. However, Arthur overlooked the scruples of others. Although Doflamingo decided to cooperate with Arthur, in order not to put himself in danger, he made some preparations, which delayed time. After dinner, just as Arthur was soaking in the big bathtub and enjoying Mei rubbing his back, the communicator that was placed aside suddenly rang. Captain, it's a communication from Doflamingo. AI's voice came from the communicator. It's really not the right time to come, AI-chan, you can help me reply. Okay, Captain. On a small island, it was the temporary residence of Doflamingo and his party. Everything was ready, and Doflamingo pressed the communicator. However, after a few seconds, the communicator did not respond, and just when everyone thought they had been tricked, a light curtain came out of the communicator. Jong jong jong. A virtual platform was built, the surrounding lights flickered, and thousands of people roared. AI slowly rises from the middle of the stage. Let me introduce myself, I'm the cutest AI-chan in the world, and since the captain is temporarily inconvenient, I'll answer any questions you may have. Seeing this little guy who suddenly appeared, Doflamingo and his party were a little confused. Dover, are we mistaken? Torrible looked at AI with suspicion. Hey, that's rude to you. AI shouted angrily, and then covered her face a little shyly. Although AI-chan knows that her cuteness makes it difficult for you to accept it for a while, this is the reality. Around Doflamingo's calm city, his cheeks couldn't help but shake at this moment. There should be no mistake, such a non-rigorous thing is not done by the strong. Doflamingo suppressed the fluctuations in his heart and asked tentatively. I want to know what kind of cooperation I talked about before. This is also the main concern of Doflamingo. The so-called cooperation can only be called cooperation if it is a win-win situation. I don't know about this, AI-chan doesn't know, I need the captain to talk to you personally. Hearing AI's words, Doflamingo's brow twitched. Then I'm afraid you don't know the distribution of benefits of cooperation, right? Yes. In Doflamingo's almost mad gaze, AI replied confidently. And what is the purpose of your appearance? Doflamingo finally couldn't help it, was this idle boredom to entertain him? So cute. AI said with a very cute expression. I add a hashtag asterisk. Doflamingo had 10,000 grass and mud horses galloping past in his heart at the moment. Ahem. At this time, the picture changes, and the image of Arthur appears in it. I'm sorry for what happened just now, I'll teach her a good lesson. Looking at the few people with iron faces, almost crazy but unable to vent, Arthur showed an apologetic smile. As for the cooperation thing, you will definitely be satisfied. Later, Arthur told Doflamingo about the initial content of the collaboration. Inside the store, you can find everything you need, and you can take any of them and set off a trend on the sea. Then use Doflamingo's existing network to sell, and I believe that the business will be booming. This is Arthur's original idea. As for the future, let's work together for a while and see. I thought you were going to sell arms to me, but it turned out to be just some goods. Doflamingo's brow furrowed. Don't underestimate these goods, the profits obtained are no less than those from the sale of arms, and we will share the profits 82. We only have 2 shares, will it be a little too little? Doflamingo's tone was a little bad, and these 2 did seem to be much less. I sell the goods, you only need to sell them, it is completely a business-free business, and the 2% obtained is pure profit, which is already a lot. If you feel that the conditions are okay and have the intention to cooperate, then come to this position to find me. Arthur dropped a signpost and turned off the communication. Dover, what's your decision? All eyes were on Doflamingo. The main question now is how much you can earn. The purpose of their arms sales is also to make money, and if the 20% they get is more than what they earn from selling arms, they can do it. At the very least, you don't have to worry about the supply of goods. In fact, they do not make a lot of money from selling arms. Buying arms from the Navy and then selling them to others is just a difference. Let's go over, and we have to do it if we can do it. After thinking about it for a while, Doflamingo finally made up his mind. The group sailed on a sailboat and sailed according to the route planned on the communicator. And on the other side of the sea. I'm sorry, do you know which pirate attacked the naval branch in this area? On a pirate ship, all the pirates were partying, and a faint voice sounded beside it. The pirate turned his head and saw a pheasant standing on the side of the ship at some point. It's the Navy. A voice rang out, and all the pirates immediately took up their weapons. Brush. Ice spread out from the pheasant's feet, enveloping the entire pirate ship in an instant. Yes, it's a pheasant. Seeing this ability, all the pirates remembered a terrifying name. Do any of you know about my previous question? Looking at the frozen pirates, the pheasant's expression did not change much. No. I don't know. The faces of all the pirates were filled with horror, and in an instant they were all incapacitated, and the rumors on the sea were indeed true. Oh, that's it? The pheasant replied lightly, and then turned to leave. The pheasant was driving on his bicycle on the sea, and the frozen pirate ship behind him slowly sank into the sea. This kind of scene happens in the sea continuously. Until Hugh Bryan appeared in the pheasant's line of sight. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, Return Captain. Chapter 82. On the deck of Hyperion, some of Arthur's men were drinking afternoon tea. With Rita here, an afternoon tea is also full of rituals. Kiana sat on the stool, swaying her legs leisurely, her little head restlessly scanning around, and suddenly her eyes widened as if she had discovered a new world. Captain, come and see, there's someone riding a bicycle on the sea. Kiana suddenly pointed into the distance excitedly. Rita and May turned their heads suspiciously, and sure enough, they could see a man in a Navy uniform in the distance, pedaling a bicycle towards them. Captain, it's the Navy. Rita's eyes flashed slightly, and the corners of her mouth hooked up a faint arc. Is it the enemy? Mei stared at her and stood up from her seat. Wait and see. On this sea, it is possible to drive on the sea with a bicycle, and there is only one person in the Navy. Pheasant. This man who has the frozen fruit of nature. But looking at the rank on his shoulder, he is only a major general at the moment. In the middle of the sea, a pheasant rides a bicycle, and under the tires, a cold ice condenses to form a road. From a distance, it looks like a bicycle driving on the sea. The speed was not in a hurry, and he slowly came to the side of Hugh Bryan. Seeing this ship, the pheasant was also quite surprised. There are no signs on the ship, so it is impossible to tell which side it belongs to. But it didn't matter, he just asked a question. Parking the bicycle in the middle of the sea, the pheasant jumps and wants to jump on the boat. But a palm suddenly appeared on top of his head, and the pheasant quickly unloaded and fell back onto the bicycle. I'm sorry, but no one else on my ship can get up. Arthur lay on the side of the ship and looked down at the pheasant. It's a hassle, but it's okay. The pheasant didn't care about these, scratched his head a little irritably, raised his head and asked. A few days ago, the naval branch in the sea area was attacked. Do you know any clues? It turned out that it was because of this. The Navy branch was destroyed like that, and it is understandable that the Navy headquarters sent someone to investigate. Know some clues? Arthur nodded cheerfully, which made the pheasant's eyes light up. Finally, there are some clues. Hurry up and finish it, and hurry back to sleep. But Arthur's next words made the pheasant slightly stunned. I just don't know if there are any rewards for the clues provided, and it's not easy for us businessmen to make money. Haha, just kidding, it's our duty as good citizens to help the Navy. Arthur continued with a smile. I've heard that during the time when the Navy branch was attacked, a man named Doflamingo came and went many times, and that's all I know. Arthur didn't hesitate to sell Doflamingo. Doflamingo? Okay, I see, thank you for your help. The pheasant muttered a low word and nodded at Arthur. It doesn't matter, I hope the Navy can bring these arrests to justice as soon as possible, otherwise there is no sense of security at all when driving on the sea. Arthur said, the smile on his face even thicker. We will. After the pheasant finished speaking, he left. Captain, isn't it a little bad for us to betray the partner we are about to work with? Looking at the back of the pheasant fading away, Rita's eyes were filled with doubt. Don't worry, even if they know who did it, they won't dare to do it. Arthur's gaze was inexplicable, and he waved his right hand. Come on, keep afternoon tea. On the other side, the pheasant got the news and picked up the phone bug while driving through the sea. How about Major General Cusin, have you gotten some useful clues? The voice of the steel skeleton came from the phone bug. I found some clues, it was done by a guy named Doflamingo, the name was somewhat familiar, but I couldn't remember it for a while. What did you say? Doflamingo. As soon as the voice fell, there was a sound from the phone bug that the steel bone sky had increased several times. Don Quixote Doflamingo. Immediately, Steel Bone's tone immediately became serious, and he said Doflamingo's full name. Don Quixote, the name. At this time, the pheasant finally remembered, why did it feel a little familiar? Don Quixote, who used to be a member of the Draconians, gave up his privileges as a Draconian, but his identity as a Draco would not change. It's a bit of a tough thing to do. Cyborg paced back and forth in the room with some irritation. As a Navy, they can't take a shot at the Draconians, even if they give up their privileges. There's another thing that's weird. The voice of a pheasant came from the phone bug. I just met a strange ship calling itself a caravan on the sea, and there was no sign on it. Don't look at the pheasant always has a lazy attitude, but he doesn't let go of the slightest suspicion. Arthur's ship seemed strange to him. A ship without any signs. Steelbone's brow furrowed, this thing was indeed very strange. Any ship, be it a caravan, a pirate, or a navy, will have its own emblem. If there is no sign, it means that you want to hide your identity or it doesn't need any logo per se. What does that captain look like? Due to his previous suspicions, Cyborg Sara is now a little suspicious. A very ordinary galleon, 1 man and 3 women. Faint words came out from the phone city worm. You mean 1 man and 3 women, are you sure it's 1 man and 3 women? It shouldn't be that way. A terrifying thought crossed Cyber's mind, causing goosebumps all over his body. Yes, it's just 1 man and 3 women, what's wrong with Marshal Kong? Cusin, think about it now, have you ever seen the faces of those people on the ship? Where does the warring state still have the heart to answer the pheasant's question now, and hurriedly asked. The urgency in his voice made the pheasant feel a little puzzled. How could I have seen it? On the wanted warrant, on the one that was issued a long time ago. The pheasant's mid-sentence was interrupted by the words added by the steel bones. On the sea, a bicycle moving slowly forward stops. Pheasant's mind quickly flashed one wanted notice after another, recalling the 4 wanted notices that his teacher Sci-fi had solemnly let them see. The faces above gradually coincide. Click. Around the pheasant, the cold air poured out, instantly freezing a large area. Yes, Marshal Kong, I know who he is. After the pheasant finished speaking, he put away the phone bug, the laziness on his body was swept away, and his eyes burst into bright light. And at the same time the headquarters of the Navy. Hey, 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 Kuzan, Kuzan. Looking at the phone bug that was hung up, Steelbone's face changed instantly. Especially the last sentence of the pheasant, it can already be determined. I didn't expect to appear in the sea again. The Arthur Pirates. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, Return Captain. Chapter 83. Captain, look at him, he's back, and he doesn't seem to be very friendly. The moment Kiana reminded her, everyone on deck had already noticed. The main thing is that the breath of the pheasant is not hidden in the slightest, like a firefly in the dark, which is impossible for people to ignore. On the sea, the pheasant has completely abandoned his bicycle. One step was taken, and before he even touched the surface of the sea, the cold air emitted from his body had already frozen the sea surface. The ice spreads out in an irregular pattern, showing the mood of the pheasant at the moment. There was a cold light in his eyes, staring closely at Arthur, who was looking at him. It's not very friendly. Arthur rubbed his chin with his right hand and frowned slightly. What exactly has happened, and why is the reaction of the pheasant so huge? Step by step, he walked dozens of meters away from Hyperion, and the pheasant's cold face was full of seriousness. Ice spread from beneath his feet, quickly freezing all of Hyperion in the sea. But even after doing so, the pheasant still didn't stop. The cold air on his body surged, and the frozen sea expanded further outward. Rear Admiral, what are you doing here? Arthur's expression gradually retracted, and it was obvious that the comber was not good. Arthur Alexander, a bounty of 100 million Bailey. Hearing these words from the pheasant's mouth, Arthur knew that his identity had been revealed. Has disappeared for a long time, and his wanted film has not been updated, and he thought it would be submerged in people's memories. I didn't expect to be recognized as soon as I came out. Raiden May, a bounty of 80 million Bailey. Rita Lothweiser, 80 million Bailey. Kiana Kislana, a bounty of 10 million Bailey. Then, the pheasant's gaze swept over the 3 people around Arthur. Don't mention the bounty of 10 million Bailey, it's really not in line with Miss Ben's strength. Kiana let go of her hips and shouted a little angrily. 10 million Bailey, just thinking about it, I feel a little pitiful. Normally, the Navy headquarters would set a bounty based on the danger level of a person, but for some reason, it doesn't follow this method at all when it comes to you. Pheasant said, looking at Arthur again. The reward of 100 million Bailey, once the teacher told me, it is not too much to add a 0 later. Until now, the pheasant remembers the look on Zifa's face. Adoration, awe, worry, all sorts of emotions mixed together and leave only a sigh at the end. At that time, he didn't understand why his teacher had such an expression on his face. Your teacher, Zifa, how are you doing now? We've known each other for a long time. Arthur asked. Teacher, he is very good, thank you for your concern. After the pheasant finished speaking, he continued. My teacher once told me that there is a person with the same ability as me on this sea, but the gap between us is indeed like the moon and fireflies. The pheasant's voice was slow, soft, as if it was the first time he had entered the naval headquarters, and Zifa had crossed over to the time he had spoken to him. So I wanted to verify for myself, how strong is it? The cold air around the pheasant became more and more intense. The firmness in his eyes could be seen that this battle was inevitable. "Captain, just let me do this kind of thing." Kiana volunteered to pat her chest, but was stopped by Arthur. "When he finds me, let me play with him," Arthur said, leaping from Hyperion, and standing in front of the pheasant. "Ai-chan, open the Hyperion shield." "Okay, Captain," Ai-chan received. As soon as he finished speaking, Huber Lee's safety body was shrouded in a pale blue passport. At the same time, not far away, Doflamingo and his party followed the signs to this place. It's so easy to use, and it reminds us of the undercurrents along the way, and I'm afraid that's all the strongest navigator can do. Toribal looked at the light curtain shining from the communicator on Doflamingo's wrist, and his tone was full of amazement. "The price of this communicator alone is immeasurable." The glint in Doflamingo's eyes. "The communicators that are casually thrown to others have such powerful abilities, so how many treasures are there in Arthur's hands?" Doflamingo is now becoming more and more confident in this collaboration. "Dover, what is up ahead?" Diamanti pointed ahead, which was exactly the direction they were going. "How can this place be frozen in ice?" Looking at the cold ice that was still slowly spreading outward, doubts appeared in everyone's minds. "That ship." The silhouette of a ship could be seen in the distance, and the two people next to it were like small black dots. It can be seen from this that the ability of the pheasant has affected a large range. "Let's go, let's go." Doflamingo jumped from the ship and landed on the ice. "The ice is really hard, like land." Toribal spoke with surprise in his tone. "It should be caused by the able." The distance was closer, and the two figures facing each other could finally be seen clearly. "It's Rear Admiral Pheasant." Diamanti exclaimed. They had long heard of the Rear Admiral's name. "Its strength is terrifying, and many pirates will be terrified even by hearing its name." "Dover, I didn't expect them to be targeted by the people from the Navy headquarters, we." Toribal was a little worried and wanted to run away. He, that's interesting." Doflamingo smiled, for he could see that one of the two opposing men was calm and the other looked serious. "Which is stronger and which is weak, the superior is judged. Come on, Captain." On Hyperion, Kiana shouted with a wave of her arms. "Let's make a move, I've already arrived, so don't waste time." Arthur beckoned to the pheasant. "So." The pheasant's eyes sank and he took the lead. Faced with the existence that even his teacher had to be in awe, the pheasant did not dare to be careless. The ice condensed in front of him and shot out towards Arthur, and the condensed ice grew larger and larger as it approached. "Do you want to freeze me?" Arthur shook his head, using the same moves as the pheasant. Two clouds of ice collided between the two. Boom! The ice chips scattered, and the colliding ice grew larger and larger. The pheasant's whole body tensed, as if he had used the strength of his whole body, while Arthur on the opposite side made a move with his right hand. Another attack slashed through a half-arc towards the pheasant. "What?" The pheasant was shocked. Seemingly a simple collision, he had already used most of his strength, but Arthur on the opposite side still had the strength to launch a second attack. Is that really the difference? In the face of the imminent attack, the pheasant could only dodge, and its body quickly retreated. Without the support of the pheasant, the ice hockey in the middle could no longer resist. However, what everyone didn't expect was this. The puck that was forced back and Arthur's second attack collided. Boom! For a while, the ice fog was filled. Did you make a mistake? This is not only the question in the pheasant's mind, but also the doubt of the people who watched the battle of Doflamingo and his party not far away. However, soon the answer was revealed. The ice mist dissipated, and a statue of Rita stood vividly. "How is Rita, is it pretty?" Arthur turned his head and smiled at Rita. "Rita loves it, thank you, Captain." The second attack from Arthur turned into tens of thousands of thin ice blades the moment it collided with the ice hockey. From the outside, the ice mist is made up of ice blades. Each ice blade did its own job, and in an instant, it completed this somewhat spectacular scene. Is it really like what the teacher said, you have to reach the level of an admiral to have the strength to fight? It's just the first time he fights, Arthur forced him back like child's play, and with such strength, he is now too far behind to catch up with. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, return captain. Chapter 84. The calm sea is somewhere covered with ice, like land. On the ice, everyone's eyes were on the ice sculpture in the middle. The ice sculpture is lifelike and lifelike, as if a real person was standing there. The captain really likes Rita a little more. On Hyperion, Kiana pouted slightly, a look of jealousy. That's something you can't help but do. This time Rita was not modest at all, and her smug appearance made Kiana even more angry, but she was helpless. The gap between us shouldn't be that big. The pheasant looked at Arthur in front of him, and he couldn't believe that the gap between the two could play with him in applause. Ice cubes, 2 thorn spears. The ice spear gradually coalesced above the pheasant. Whoosh! Shoot at Arthur at great speed. Alas, it's this childlike attack again, pheasant. Looking at the approaching ice spear, Arthur sighed. Pheasant, let me show you, ice, how to use it. Arthur finished speaking, and raised his right hand in the air. Susanoo. Behind Arthur, a huge upper body condensed by ice emerged. The upper body is in the shape of a human, but it is a bone without flesh and blood. The ribs on the chest surrounded Arthur and protected him in the middle. The whole is surrounded by cold air, crystal clear, like a work of art. Facing the speeding ice spear, Susaneng's hand slapped and smashed the ice spear between his palms. Oh my God, when did the captain learn such a move? Kiana's face was shocked, they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Could it be that the captain is secretly practicing in secret? Kiana's gaze looked at Rita and May, and they both shook their heads. None of the three knew that it was impossible. Because there will be at least one person by the captain's side 24 hours a day. What's your move? The pheasant looked at the giant in front of him in disbelief. Ice not only has the ability to freeze everything, but also has the ability to change everything. Arthur said as he said, a weapon made of ice appeared in his hand. And he, of course, is the same. He, naturally, refers to Susanengu who is attached to his body. This was also what Arthur suddenly thought, and suddenly opened the door to a new world. However, this Susanoo itself has a cold tenacity, and if it is given to others, it can indeed add a little defense, but for Arthur, it is a dispensable existence. The strength of the armed color it possesses is not something that ordinary people can break. But as long as there is handsomeness, this is enough. Step by step, he walked towards the pheasant, and the Susanoo on his body also moved. The tall body brings a strong oppressive force. It's a monster. Toribal muttered to himself. When Susanoo appeared, he felt like his soul was going to be frozen. Dover, we really should think about the cooperation again. However, when Toribal saw Doflamingo's increasingly excited face, he knew that whatever he was saying was useless. The cold air emanating from Susanoo's whole body seemed to freeze even space, which made the pheasant feel the word cold for the first time. No way, even if you could condense the ice into what you imagined, they were just objects, and you seemed to have a mind of your own. I still remember the scene where Susanengu slapped his attack with both hands before. Arthur didn't do anything at the time, but Susanoo moved on his own. When you treat ice as an item, you've already lost, pheasant. As long as you believe that he is alive, he is alive. Hearing Arthur's words, the pheasant's eyes widened, and his heart was shocked beyond imagination. Susanengu's right arm was raised high, and a huge sword condensed in the palm of his hand. Brush. With the momentum of thunder, it slashed straight down. Rumble. The ice shattered, and cracks spread outward. The pheasant's body was like a kite with a broken string, and it was blown away by a huge impact. It's so strong, I actually defeated the rear admiral. Diamante's eyes widened, and his face was full of incredulity. The pheasant, like a bright star, has never missed a task from the first time. Its strong strength has terrified many pirates. And yet now. Looked at the pheasant lying on the ground in embarrassment, and if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it anyway. Ahem. The pheasant struggled to his knees and coughed lightly. Although his body was not hit by the big sword, the impact like a missile still made him a little uncomfortable. Looking up, he looked at the figure standing in the distance. Can't beat it at all. His own attack was easily defused, but the opponent's attack made him so embarrassed. Do you have to give up like that? The pheasant slowly stood up. No, you can't throw in the towel. As soon as he ripped off the navy cloak on his body, the pheasant took a deep breath, and the cold air around him gradually condensed. Are you going to do a trick? Arthur raised an eyebrow and stood there watching quietly. Ice Age. The pheasant's hands spread slightly, and at the same time, a powerful cold air spread outward. Under the influence of these cold air, the sunlight in the sky became cold and biting. With the pheasant as the center, the strong cold air freezes everything. Click, click. Doflamingo and his party stood in the distance, and were soon attacked. The instant cold hit them and they didn't have time to react. Starting from the legs, the ice gradually covers the whole body. And the three of them in Hugh Blyan were not affected in any way because of the protective shield. Sensing the chill around him, Arthur nodded in satisfaction. It's a bit of a decent feeling. But it's still a little worse. Rumble. The cold air, which was several times stronger than that of the pheasant, burst out from Arthur's body and swept out in an instant with a devastating force. Doflamingo and his party, who were still struggling, were frozen in an instant. And in the distance, the pheasant's frozen face was still filled with disbelief. Well, it's finally done. Arthur took a deep breath and came to Doflamingo's men. Stretched out his finger and tapped it on each of them. Click, click. The frozen body was full of cracks, covering the whole body like a spider's web. Boom. The ice exploded, freeing them from their frozen cages. Lead the way. This is not the place to talk. Arthur said and turned back to Hyperion, and then a brilliant sword slashed down. The frozen sea ahead of Hugh Blyan split in two. Doflamingo looked at Mei, who was standing at the front of the deck with her sword sheathed. When he saw those cold eyes coming over, he hurriedly led the way ahead as fast as he could. After the last beating, Mei is now a haunting nightmare in Doflamingo's heart. Everyone gradually moved away, and in place, the frozen body of the pheasant stood motionless. Personal imagination is really limited, the kind of inspiration that needs to be flashed in the whole chapter, and the previous ideas have already been written. This will have a chance in the future. As long as you have that kind of thought, you might be inspired in 2 days. I'm pure and good, but what can I do? Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, Return Captain. Chapter 85. This is your temporary residence. It's really chilly. Arthur shook his head as he looked at the surrounding rock-made houses. These houses are presumably built using Pika's abilities. It probably doesn't have much to do with our cooperation. Doflamingo's eyes twitched, and he sat down on the stone chair outside. In the stage of development, Doflamingo has been engaged in a career, and they do not have much requirements for the living environment. Nature doesn't matter. Arthur glanced around. The island was not large, and it was very hidden. It should have been deliberately found by Doflamingo. Sitting across from Doflamingo, Arthur spoke. What do people on the sea need right now? Weapons. Doflamingo replied directly without hesitation. Pirates need weapons to plunder wealth, navies need weapons to destroy pirates, and even civilians need weapons to protect their homes. War is the main theme of the sea, so weapons are even more sought after. That's why Doflamingo sells arms. In addition to the supply is a little more difficult to get, I am never afraid of not finding a buyer. You're right, but you're not entirely right. Arthur got up from his seat and looked out at the seaside in the distance. In fact, food, clothing, housing, and transportation can make a lot of profit from it. There were only weapons, and Arthur didn't intend to sell them. Although with the weapons in his hands, if they are really sold, I am afraid that the world government will beg to buy them. However, if the weapon sold is one day used by someone else to beat him, it is really a joke. Food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. But these are just the most basic needs of people. There is no shortage of those who have money, but they can't afford to buy those who don't. Doflamingo saw this very thoroughly. What you're talking about is just ordinary food, clothing, housing, and transportation, and naturally it's not competitive. Arthur smiled mysteriously and, with a wave of his right hand, placed a bottle of wine and a few glasses on the table. Taste it? Doflamingo looked at the wine bottle in front of him suspiciously, opened the lid, and suddenly a tempting aroma of wine wafted out. It's so fragrant, what kind of wine is this? Doflamingo was also a man who had seen the world, and he was sure that no wine on the sea could compare to this one. Some couldn't wait to pour a glass and groaned, and suddenly the pupils behind the sunglasses slowly expanded. What does it feel like? The entrance is soft and refreshing, like a girl's fierceness. The wine runs down the throat, slowly spreading to the limbs, and the cells of the whole body are cheering. It's tempting to have another drink. Drinking 3 glasses in a row already made him feel a little drunk. What kind of wine is this? How much of this wine do you have? A question popped up, and Doflamingo eagerly asked a second one. Because he understands that this is a huge business opportunity. As long as there is a sufficient and stable supply of goods, it is difficult not to make money. The name of this wine is Emperor Drunk. How many you want, but rare is expensive. I will give you 10 jars first, 2 of which you can use for free publicity. In order to strive for the maximum benefit, upfront publicity is indispensable. Only by letting the majority of people know the taste of this liquor can it be sold at a higher price. No problem, I have some news here for the gathering between the nobles. How much are you going to sell this wine for? This is the core issue, and the price is also related to the distribution of benefits after Doflamingo. 1,000,000. Although the price of 1,000,000 is a bit expensive, I believe that there will still be many people who buy it. Although many people lived in poverty on this sea, the nobles lived in extreme luxury. 1,000,000 is a drop in the bucket for them. No, 1,000,000 cups. Arthur said as he slowly poured himself a glass, gestured to Doflamingo, and drank it all. Arthur then gave Doflamingo the 10 jars of wine, and told him where the island was. If you run out of wine, go to the island and find him. Although there were only 10 jars of wine, Arthur was confident that Doflamingo would get the most out of it. Dover, a glass of wine, 1,000,000, I'm afraid even those nobles can't take out much. Torrible looked at the distant shadow of the Hugh Blian ship and saw the glass of wine in his hand in disbelief. 1,000,000 glasses of wine, this is simply more lucrative than their arms business. It's my pattern that is small, and 1,000,000 glasses can be worthy of the value of this imperial wine. Doflamingo looked down at a book in his hand. On the importance of packaging. A. Huberian's living room. Captain, why don't we sell it ourselves? Kiana asked the question that had been held in her mind for a long time. The reason is simple, the first is who we are, and the second is that we don't have any connections at the moment, and it takes too long to start everything from scratch. Besides, wouldn't it be nice to have someone else work for us? Arthur said as a wine bottle appeared on the table in front of him. This bottle is small and delicate, made of jade, and the value of the bottle alone is already very expensive. And it's also to test the abilities of Doflamingo's party. Pick up the glass and pour it slowly, and the clear wine carries the steaming water into the glass below. A heart-warming aura spreads outward. If you want to make money, you have to take the high-end route. Arthur uses mid-range wine to open the market first, check the reaction, and then the real layout. He's going to make it impossible for everyone on the sea to live without him. Oh. Kiana nodded as if she didn't understand. A smile tugged at Arthur's lips. To dominate the world, you don't have to stand at the pinnacle of power. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, Return Captain. Chapter 86. Inside the Navy headquarters, a tall figure shuttled rapidly through the flow of people. General Zifa. As soon as the Navy he saw wanted to say hello, Zifa's figure had already disappeared from his eyes. Rushed to the medical room as fast as he could. Kuzan, Kuzan. The loud shouts captured everyone in the medical room. Zifa, be quiet, there are other patients here. The voice of Steelbone's reprimand came from a distance, but Zifa's gaze fell directly on the pheasant on the hospital bed next to him. How could it be? Lying on the hospital bed, the pheasant's whole body was still covered by ice, and Zifa rushed over with an arrow step, his face full of incredulity. As a natural frozen devil fruit powerhouse, how could he be frozen by ice? Don't worry, Zifa, after inspection, Major General Kuzan is fine. It's all frozen like this, and it says it's okay. Hearing Steelbone's words, Zifa's eyes immediately widened like bull's eyes. Don't you even believe the doctor? Steelbone's tone suddenly became stern, which made Zifa slowly suppress the excitement in his heart. Cyborg sighed and continued. Outwardly, Major General Kuzan is frozen, but in fact it is not completely frozen. According to the test, this layer of ice outside is like a cage that binds Major General Kuzan, making him unable to move his whole body. As long as he breaks it, there will be no problem. I see. Hearing Steele's explanation, Zifa understood and breathed a sigh of relief. Then what are you doing, stunned? Hurry up and break the shell. As soon as Zifa said it, he saw the slightly wrinkled expression of the steel bones, and hurriedly stopped his mouth. This is not ordinary ice, and there is domineering energy entwined in it, which cannot be broken in ordinary ways. If you use brute force in case Major General Kuzan on the side is injured, it will be worth the loss. Zifa scratched his head a little embarrassed. If you can save Kuzan, I'm afraid that Steelbone Kong would have done that a long time ago. Is there no other way? When you see the pheasant on the hospital bed, do you have to lie here all the time? It's been a while since Major General Kuzan came back, the ice is slowly melting, and the domineering spirit circulating in it is gradually dissipating, and it should be out of trouble in a few days. Hearing the words of the steel bones, Zifa breathed a sigh of relief. Then the yellow ape and the red dog also rushed over, and when they saw the appearance of the pheasant, they were all shocked and inexplicable. They couldn't be clearer about the pheasant's strength. But now that he has become like this, how strong is the person who defeated him? It's terrifying. What kind of opponent did Kuzan meet? The yellow ape had a frightened expression on his face, while the red dog next to him had a serious gaze. The Navy is about to face a powerful enemy, and their strength is still too weak. Zifa watched here for a while, and was called out by Cyborg. It was my fault that Major General Kuzan was seriously injured. Walking out of the medical room, Steel Gukong was the first to blame himself. Marshal Kong, who is the enemy? So far, Zifa didn't know the specific reason, but today he suddenly heard that the pheasant was injured, so he hurried over. On this sea, Kuzan is only a major general, but ordinary people can't hurt him at all, especially in the North Sea. Steelbone shook his head as he spoke, his face gradually becoming solemn. It's the Arthur Pirates, and Rear Admiral Kuzan met the Arthur Pirates in the North Sea. Zifa, who was standing next to the Steelbone Sky, was shocked when he heard this name. Arthur's Pirates, how long has it been since he'd heard the name? Are you really sure it's the Arthur Pirates? The memories that had been sealed in Zifa's mind gradually revived. Crowned in the world, domineering, it is the only figure. It's not certain yet, but it's 80% certain. Cyborg said with a sigh. When Major General Kuzan wakes up, everything will be revealed. After Steelbone Kong finished speaking, he shook his head and turned to leave. Zifa stood in place, and the shock in his heart could not be dissipated for a long time. If the Arthur Pirates reappear on the seas, will their navy now have enough strength to fight a fight? On the other side, Doflamingo was on his way to a banquet held by a nobleman, using his channels. Dover, you've been reading this book for most of the day, have you gained anything? Torrible moved his body and slowly came to Doflamingo's side. It was the first time in a long time that they had seen Doflamingo reading a book, and it had been so long. Did I get the crystal bottle you prepared? Doflamingo asked, closing the book. It's done. Torrible pulled out a palm-sized crystal bottle from behind him. The homogeneous body is made of crystal, which is crystal clear. Good. Doflamingo took the crystal bottle, opened a jar next to it, and filled the crystal bottle until it was 80% full. How much do you think a vial like this can sell? The wine is like a dream in the crystal bottle. By looking at the book in his hand, Doflamingo understood the value of packaging. No matter how good the wine in the jar is, as long as it is not opened, no one else will notice. But when you change the container of a crystal bottle, it is completely different, and it instantly improves several grades. If a cup is worth 1 million Baileys, there are at least 7 or 8 cups in this small bottle. This bottle is priced at 10 million Baileys. Without continuing to let them guess, Doflamingo directly stated his price. Ignoring the shocked gazes of the 3 people in front of him, he continued. The next thing to do is to pour all the wine into the crystal bottle. Doflamingo's party was busy, getting closer and closer to the venue of the banquet. Holding the crystal bottle in his hand with 2 fingers, Doflamingo's eyes were deep. It can be expected that the protagonist of tonight's banquet is now in his hands. At the same time, on the calm sea, Hyperion moved forward slowly. In the living room, Arthur had just finished 10 rounds of replenishment, and a faint smile appeared on his face when he looked at the 15 character fragments that were still missing. 15 character shards, if you're lucky, you can draw them once, and if you're unlucky, 2 times is completely enough. When the time comes, the lawgiver of emptiness will descend upon this sea. It's really full of anticipation. Captain, we found a super pretty island, like a fountain. The door opened, and Kiana hurriedly untied it, pulling Arthur out without saying a word. Captain, you will be amazed when you see it, this is the first time you have encountered such a beautiful island. Kiana pulled Arthur onto the deck and pointed ahead with her right hand. Captain, look pretty, isn't it beautiful? Directly in front of Hyperion, a small island that resembles a fountain rises in the middle of the sea. It's really beautiful, and it has a nice name. What's the name? Kiana, Rita, and May all looked at each other. The capital of water. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, return captain. Chapter 87. It's really lively here, and this thing called water meat is also delicious. On some narrow roads, Kiana weaves through the crowd and is amazed by everything around her. The 3 people behind him all smiled when they saw Kiana like this. Captain, this is for you, Rita and May have a part to do. Kiana turned around and shoved the water and meat, which she felt was very delicious, into the hands of the 3 of them. Kiana, Do you know whose favorite food is water, water, and meat? Arthur looked at the elastic water and flesh in front of him, and his eyes couldn't help but fall on Kiana's chest opposite. Captain, where are your eyes looking? Kiana folded her hands to her chest, but she was still curious about Arthur's words. Captain, who did you just say is this water meat your favorite food? Kiana couldn't help but lean forward and asked. No, this is it. Arthur pointed to Blue, who was marching in the nearby river. Blue is the means of water transportation in this water capital. Captain, you're so annoying, saying bad things about people in a different way. Kiana slapped Arthur in dissatisfaction. Woohoo! Just then, from a high place above, a blue rushed down, passed in front of Arthur and them, and sailed into the distance. This is also one of the games that many people love to play. The waterway rushes down from the top, but it's exciting. Captain, Captain, shall we play with this? Kiana was instantly interested when she saw it. Okay, you can play anything. A group of 4 people appreciated the water and soil customs of the water capital, slowly walked towards the heights, and finally rented 2 blues and rushed straight down from above. Wow, oh! Kiana, who was at the front, opened her arms and shouted all the way to attract the attention of many people. And in the midst of these streams, looking at the fleeting figure in the river next to him, Riley took the wine bottle in his hand and suddenly paused. Was it just dazzling? That fleeting face was deeply etched in Riley's mind. It must have been dazzling. Riley shook his head, a little incredulous, but the pace of progress was much faster. Weaving through the flow of people, we arrived at a dock. Here is the famous Roger Pirates of the Sea, and sitting opposite Roger is Tom the Fishman Hornfishman. Tom, known as the world's #1 boatwright. And Roger's purpose for coming here is self-evident, just to ask Tom to build a ship for them. When sailing on the sea, the ship is an important means of transportation, and it is always faced with various difficult environments, so it is a top priority. Roger came to visit Tom in person. Riley, why have you been out for so long? Ha ha Harelli, you can't be secretly drinking halfway, are you? Next to Roger, Spark laughed. The wine has been bought. Riley glared at Spark viciously, and put the wine in her hand in front of Roger, looking like she wanted to say something. It's just that now Roger is preoccupied with shipbuilding and doesn't notice. Master Tom, please be sure to accede to your request. Roger said, holding up the wine glass in front of him. According to what you say about sailing, there is only one kind of wood in the world that is more suitable. For Tom, since someone commissioned him to build a ship, he would say yes. It doesn't matter what the identity of the other person is. The ship is innocent, there is no good or bad. What kind of wood is it? If it is lacking, we will go out and find it immediately. Roger hurriedly asked. The name is the treasure tree, Adam. As for going out to find it, it is not in this water city, but it is not free, you need to pay for it. That's for sure. Roger nodded, drank the wine glass in his hand, and the matter was settled. Riley, you've had some preoccupations along the way, did something happen? After talking about the ship, on the way back to his residence, Riley's anomaly was finally caught by Roger. When I went out just now, I seemed to have found an acquaintance. Riley's brow furrowed. The fleeting figure made him unsure if what he was seeing was wrong. When you meet an acquaintance, why do you have a ghost-like expression? Spark asked, a little confused. You may not believe it, but I just ran into the Arthur Pirates. As soon as the words fell, the 3 of them turned into the hotel they had booked before. The steps stopped in place, looking in the same direction. At the counter, Arthur and his party were buying a room. Seeing Roger, Arthur was not surprised. Since Riley was able to see him at that time, Arthur naturally discovered Riley. The surprise had already passed at that time. When he came to the water capital, Arthur could guess what Roger wanted to do, and there was no conflict of interest between the two. He nodded at Roger, then looked at the waiter in front of him. A large suite, which was a deposit for 3 days. After paying the money and taking the keys, the group of 4 went upstairs. Arthur, I ran into it here. Looking at the figure walking upstairs, Roger's eyes widened. I didn't expect the Lock's pirates to disband, and after such a long time, they met again. And the strength of Arthur and his party, now he still can't see through it, it's unfathomable. Luckily, I wasn't dazzled, and it turned out to be the Arthur pirates. Riley was relieved at this time. At first, I thought I was dizzy. How did they end up here? Could it be that they are also looking for Master Tom to build a ship? In this water city, there may be only one thing that can catch the attention of the Arthur pirates. Whatever the purpose of their visit, as long as it doesn't conflict with our interests, leave it alone. For Arthur, Roger is very vigilant. At the same time, in the sea far away from the water capital, several warships slowly sailed forward. Report to Lieutenant General Carp, I have received definite information that the Roger pirates have been spotted in the water capital ahead. Without the Rocks pirates, the Roger pirates are now the biggest target of their navy. Carp, on the other hand, has been hunting down Roger. The City of Water, Roger, where are you running this time? Looking ahead, Carp grinned and whispered a low voice from his mouth. All warships, sailing at full speed, target the capital of water. At the sound of an order, the speed of all warships suddenly increased. At this rate, it won't be long before you reach the City of Water. At this time, Carp didn't know that Arthur was also in the Water City at the moment. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, return captain. Chapter 88. On a calm sea, a huge luxury cruise ship slowly moves forward. There are many ships from all directions rushing in the direction of luxury cruise ships, and among the many ships, Doflamingo is among them. Pika, you stay and watch the ship. Turipol, Diamanti and the 3 of us each take a few bottles to the feast. Doflamingo said as he carried a few bottles of wine they had filled into his arms. Okay Dover. The 3 of them nodded, each doing their part. The closer you get, the more you realize the enormity of this luxury cruise ship. Ordinary sailboats approach like ants at the feet of elephants. On the side of the cruise ship there is a special port for mooring, and Doflamingo enters it in order. There were special guards at the gate to receive them. Doflamingo took an invitation and threw it over, and the 3 of them entered the banquet smoothly. The eye catches the eye with a large lavishly decorated living room with a staggered flow of people. There are places to dance, places to rest, places to eat, and various entertainment facilities are distributed around to satisfy anyone's needs. If ordinary people see this scene, they will definitely be shocked by this prosperous scene. As everyone knows, under this prosperous appearance, many transactions in the sea are carried out here. The host of this banquet was named Pico Passus, and he was the largest merchant in the sea. Many arms deals, slave trades, and bribes for the navy could be carried out with him. Compared to the scale of Doflamingo's current fledgling, it is nothing compared to the size of the game. Every once in a while, a banquet is held on the sea, and some famous people are invited. The huge ship would go around several countries and return to its original location, which would end the voyage. During this time, countless people got on board and countless people disembarked, and millions of trades spread out from this center. Doflamingo stood in the doorway and glanced around, and there were already many people who were already eager to trade. Let's go. This time, the 3 of them came to promote the sake they had, so they went straight to the point and came to the rest area. There are also many people who know Doflamingo. After all, the arms business has allowed him to accumulate a certain amount of contacts. It's just that for these people, Doflamingo doesn't have time to pay attention to them now. The 3 of them glanced at each other, smiled, found a seat to sit down after a while, and then took out the crystal bottle from their arms. Gently unscrew the lid, and the tantalizing aroma slowly spreads outward. Pick up a wine cup and pour yourself a glass and taste it carefully. The people around the three of them who were still talking about business stopped their movements, followed the aroma of wine, and couldn't help but look over. Seeing the three of them tasting with relish, they couldn't help but move their index fingers, and then slowly leaned over. The three Doflamingo were also very generous, and some people said they wanted to taste it, so they poured them a glass. Slowly, the aroma of the wine became more and more intense, and more people gathered around the three of them. And such a change finally attracted the attention of the ship's owner. In one of the rooms at the top of the ship, a middle-aged man in a neat suit looked ahead. On the huge screen, dense images appeared. These were all filmed with film and television phone bugs. Movie phone bugs are all over the ship and can make everyone hide. What's going on here? With a frown, Peak rang the bell next to him. Master Passeuse, I wonder what you command. The door opened, and a tuxedo-clad attendant pushed the door open and saluted respectfully to Pico Pathius, who was standing in front of the screen. Let's find out what's causing the commotion in the C3 area. Yes, Master Passeuse. The squire nodded, turned away, and opened the door again a moment later. An extra glass of wine in my hand compared to before. Peak, who was staring at the screen, turned his head the moment the door opened. It was the aroma of wine that surrounded the tip of his nose that he couldn't ignore. Master Passeuse. The attendant raised his hands respectfully above his head and carefully handed the glass of wine to Peak. The lowered head took a deep breath. Working on this ship for such a long time, the knowledge is naturally incomparable, but the glass of wine in front of you is indeed extremely rare. The smell alone is intoxicating, but what would it taste like if you took a sip? But such an idea can only be thought of. Peak took the glass, put it to the tip of his nose and sniffed it gently. What kind of taste is it? The smell alone had already made his calm heart gradually become restless. He placed the glass between his lips and took a sip. Rao is a man who has seen the wind and rain and experienced the ups and downs of the world, and he is a little distracted at this moment. The faint drink shot through his heart like a human beauty, and then gently caressed his wound. Did the wound still matter? No, it doesn't matter anymore. As long as you can look at her, nothing in the world is worth it. Peak stared blankly at the empty wine glass in his hand, and he drank the wine for half an hour. At this moment, the hall was surrounded by the aroma of wine, and everyone's eyes were focused on the crystal bottle in Doflamingo's hand. The purpose of boarding the ship seemed to have been forgotten at this moment. In the middle of the room, a somewhat distracted Peak withdrew his gaze and walked out slowly. In the hall, Doflamingo refused to anyone who had drunk the first drink and wanted a second one. How much wine do you have there? I want it all. A middle-aged man dressed in a gorgeous pot-bellied poop and covered in expensive jewelry crowded in front of Doflamingo. The fat palm slapped on the table, and the words that were spoken silenced the noise around him a little. It's Prince Domon. With Prince Domon's financial resources, it is more than enough to buy some wine. Seeing the person standing in front of Doflamingo, there was a lot of talk around. Bought them all? You're really a big mouthful. Doflamingo sat on a stool, his crystal bottle dangling in his hands. Humph, there's nothing I can't buy for Prince Domon, so you can make a price. As soon as Domon said this, the surroundings suddenly fell silent, and everyone wondered, how much does this wine cost? This bottle is 10 million Bailey, I don't know how many bottles you need for Prince Domon. Doflamingo looked up at Prince Demont, whose face was gradually becoming ugly, and a hint of mockery appeared at the corner of his mouth. Hiss. Hearing the offer, everyone couldn't help but gasp. 10 million Baileys are only a small bottle, which is worth more than gold. Are you kidding me? Domon's pig-like cheeks jumped fiercely. Although he was very rich, he was still unwilling to spend 10 million Bailey on such a small bottle of things. If you don't have the money, don't stand in the way of anyone who wants to buy it. Faint words came out of Doflemon's brother's mouth, not giving Dement the slightest face. You're looking for death. Doflamingo Domon in front of him also knew him. A little arms dealer dared to talk to him like that, and he had to be given some color. But before the right arm that had just been raised had fallen, the thigh-thick arm broke away from his shoulder and flew out. The air around them was silent, and then the crowd suddenly fell into a panic. They are just some businessmen or aristocrats, and they don't have much force themselves, and they just rely on the bodyguards they bring with them. It's just that they were all left on their respective ships. No one would have imagined that such a bloody scene would happen on this ship. Oblivious to everything around him, Doflamingo remained seated and flicked his fingers at the thin line of blood that lay across his eyes. You're actually... Prince Dement's face turned pale in pain, and he looked at Doflamingo in disbelief. Humph, garbage-like existence. Doflamingo stood up from his seat and looked at Prince Dorman in front of him, his eyes like an ant. Cold and unforgiving. In front of Arthur, Doflamingo has always behaved very well, there is no way to do it, in the face of strong strength, he cannot be presumptuous. But he was, after all, Doflamingo, a mere prince. Scold. I'm afraid it's not good to do something like this on my turf. In the distance, Peak-Passus approached with the guards. The scattered guards immediately calmed the crowd's emotions. Seeing the visitor, a smile tugged at the corner of Doflamingo's mouth. 10 million Bailey, do you want it? Doflamingo said as a crystal bottle appeared again in his hand. Peak-Passus stared at Doflamingo for a long time, and a word came out of his mouth. Yes. Although there had been a bloody incident just now, everyone soon calmed down and began to look for buyers or sellers as usual. It's just that most of the attention is on Doflamingo. So a small bottle actually sold for 10 million Bailey, and the most important thing is that someone still bought it, and bought 5 bottles at once. As Doflamingo and his party sailed along the cruise, the news of the gold wine in his hand gradually spread. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, Return Captain. Chapter 89. The Capital of Water. Are you sure you found the traces of Roger and his party here? On a wide street, Carp was dressed in a vice admiral's attire and followed by several navymen, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Yes, Lieutenant General Carp. The navy next to him nodded affirmatively. Scatter and scatter to seek. Carp waved his hand, and the navy behind him suddenly scattered outward. At the same time, the navy outside also took action and entered the water capital one after another. As far as the eye can see, you can see the navy shuttling back and forth on the street. And inside a hotel, Arthur has a panoramic view through the window. Sure enough, where there's Roger, there's Carp. Arthur shook his head, ignoring this. It's not coming to him, just sit back in peace. Captain, morning tea has been brewed. Rita's voice came from behind her, and Arthur answered, turning and sitting down on the couch. Captain, you're so early. The door opened, and Kiana yawned and walked out. Sleepy-eyed, he sat down next to Arthur. With a crooked neck, he leaned on Arthur and continued to sleep. Now that you're up, wash your face and sober up. For the state of Kiana, a little confused worm, Arthur shook his head helplessly. No, Captain, I'm sleepy, let me sleep a little longer. Kiana hugged Arthur, rubbed her little head, and found a comfortable position. Looking at this, it seems that you won't be able to get up for a while. But Arthur didn't get used to it, and with a strong pair of arms, he carried Kiana to the bathroom. Whew. Ah, Captain, wake up, you're fully awake. Kiana's voice could be heard in the bathroom begging for mercy. Compared with Arthur's side, in another room in the same hotel, he had a dignified face at the moment. These navies are really haunted, and they follow them wherever they go. Spark looked at the navy shuttling back and forth below, and looked at Roger, who was sitting next to him. Captain Roger, these navies have been roaming around the city, and it looks like we'll only be able to stay in the hotel today. Spark sat down in his chair a little bored. Let him stay in such a small room all day without going out, it is estimated that he is about to suffocate. How can he have energy? No, I can't. Roger shook his head and stood up. The advent of the Navy has affected the progress of Master Tom's shipbuilding. Now that Carp knows we're here, he won't give up if he doesn't find us. As a result, shipbuilding will be slower and slower. Roger said and shook his head. Captain, what do you mean? A smile tugged at the corners of Riley's mouth, and even the listless Spark on the side regained some energy. Let's go, let's get these navies out of the way so Master Tom can concentrate on his work. Picking up the cloak hanging aside, Roger opened the door and walked out, followed by Riley and Spark. Spot the Roger pirates, grab him, and don't let them run away. Arthur, who was quietly enjoying a meal in the room, was stopped by a voice coming from the window. Huh, Captain, what's going on out there? Kiana still hasn't figured out the situation. The Navy is just catching pirates. Arthur said unconcernedly. Are you going to fight? Kiana's eyes suddenly burst into a sparkling light. It has nothing to do with us, just finish breakfast quietly. Oh, well. Hearing Arthur's words, Kiana instantly wilted, and her expression became a little sluggish. If you really want to join in the fun, finish your meal before you go. Kiana's originally depressed expression instantly came to her senses, and she gobbled up the food in front of her. Be careful. Got it, Captain. Kiana nodded excitedly and jumped out of the window next to her. What an idle guy. Arthur shook his head, speechless. Captain, Mei Yi went up and took a look. For Kiana, Mei Yi is still a little worried. Well, that's fine. Arthur nodded. There were fewer people, and Arthur quickly swept away the food in front of him, and then leaned back on the sofa in satisfaction. On the sea, several warships are chasing and intercepting a pirate group. Roger, just tie your hands, you will never be able to escape today. As Carp, who was standing on the deck, spoke, he grabbed a cannonball in his right hand and smashed it at Roger. Ha ha ha, Cap, you've said that many times. Faced with the flying cannonballs, Roger drew his short knife and slashed forward. The sword chi mixed with domineering swept outward. Bang bang bang. The cannonballs exploded one after another, but they didn't even touch the corner of Roger's clothes. You're still so strong, Roger, I'd love to fight you one-on-one. Cannonballs don't pose much danger to Roger, and Carp knows that. Is there going to be one now? The two of them looked at each other and smiled at the same time. They are playing out feelings and identify with each other. If you want to fight, you have to pass this level first. All of them, aim, fire. Although the two of them were full of affection, they did not spare any hands when they fought. Carp gave the order, and dozens of shells came at him. And among these shells, several shells are faster than the others. The main thing is that there is also an armed color domineering attached to them. The old attacks won't work against me, Carp. On top of the short knife, the color of the armament was entangled, and the oncoming cannonballs were cut in half one by one. It's really fierce. At the very top of the water city, Kiana stared down, and she could see any scene of the battle in the sea. Kiana, just take a look, don't get involved and make trouble for the captain. Just when Kiana was a little eager to try, Mei Yi's figure appeared next to her. Got it, Mei Yi, do you think I'm like the kind of person who likes to find trouble? Kiana sighed decadently. Such a fun thing can only be watched from the side. And at the same time, in the living room of the hotel, Arthur, who was sitting on the sofa, opened the system interface, and the friendship points were just enough at this time. Open the lottery interface with a familiar road. There are still 15 character fragments left, so let me get into the soul. Tap 10 supplies. Suddenly, a cloud of light appeared in front of him. Just right, 15 character shards. Seeing this scene, Arthur's heart could not contain the joy welling up. Immediately opened the Valkyrie warehouse and found Kiana Kislana. Bring up the personal interface. Kiana Kislana, character shard 50/50ths, upgradable. Arthur stretched out his index finger and slowly clicked on the promotion button. Total ship collapse, reject rocks at the start. Author, return captain. Chapter 90. On the beach along the coast of the water capital, the two sides are far away. Roger, what are you doing? Carp was surprised to see Roger on the other side. The initial naval battle was expected to be Roger driving away in a boat, but he just wandered around. After a circle around the water capital, I returned here. Hee, didn't you say we haven't fought for a long time, and now I fulfill your wish? Roger grinned slowly. Now Master Tom is building a ship. If he leaves the water city now, Carp and his party will be chasing after him, and it will be difficult to come back when the time comes. On top of that, the current ship can no longer support them to continue sailing. Come on, Carp. Roger drew the short knife at his waist and attached the color of the armament to it. The breeze blows, and the cloak behind it hunts. Ha 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 ha, don't make a move. With a word of advice to the navy behind him, Carp stepped forward and came across from Roger. The two looked at each other, pulled off their cloaks at the same time, and rushed forward with smiles on their faces. Boom! The collision of long knives and iron fists swept outward with great force, shaking the navies back again and again. The two of them are fighting, and it is estimated that they will not be able to tell the winner for a while. Riley stood beside him, looking at the two men fighting each other, muttering to himself. Spark nodded sympathetically. Along the way, they often encountered Carp, and battles were even more frequent. Roger and Carp were half-pounded and tails, and they really fought, and it was difficult to tell the winner for a while. And things went just as they had expected. Carp and Roger are completely in a hard-to-go way, and every time they collide, a powerful force strikes outward. Mess up the area. And the two people who fought against each other were enjoying themselves. You haven't played in a few days, Carp, you're getting weaker. Roger grinned and looked at Carp opposite, and between the two of them their eyes met, full of emotion. This is just the beginning, Roger, and watch out for your knife being shattered by my punch. After a brief conversation, the two attacked again. However, at this moment, the surrounding space fluctuated slightly. Carp and Roger were slightly stunned. This subtle change, they had already captured it, but the attack had been issued, and it was impossible to stop it now. However, what people didn't expect was that the attacks from both sides directly penetrated the bodies of the two people. It was as if they were standing in front of them, as if they were a phantom. What's going on? Riley also noticed the anomaly at the first time, and his sharp gaze swept around. You can see that everywhere you look, the space is changing slightly. The slightly distorted space makes many people feel a little uncomfortable. And this influence envelopes the entire water capital in it. The original life of the water city was shattered in an instant. Was walking leisurely on the street, but the next second it had run to other places. The fluctuations of space make the water capital seem to be full of spatial passages everywhere, and it is chaotic in an instant. In the dockyard, Master Tom, who was building a ship, discovered an anomaly. Everybody stand still and don't move. Master Tom was still very prestigious, and when the voice came out, everyone stopped. For those who stood still, These spatial fluctuations did not affect them in any way. In one of the hotel's rooms, Arthur looked out through the window. Is it finally going to start? Let's go, Rita. Arthur said as he hugged Rita, taking advantage of the fluctuations in the space around him, and disappeared in place in an instant. The sky slowly became gloomy as spatial fluctuations stirred up everything. At this moment, the battle between Roger and Carp had stopped, and the fluctuations around them made them dare not act rashly. What happened? Carp frowned. He really couldn't figure it out. He glanced at Roger, and began to trace the source of the spatial fluctuations. And Riley is doing the same thing. There it is. It turned out to be her. Riley's gaze looked at the apex of the lower water city, where two figures stood. The surrounding spatial fluctuations emanated from one of them. Kiana stood at the apex of the water capital, her gaze slightly closed, and faint spatial fluctuations spread outward from her body. What kind of ability is this? Roger's gaze was fixed on Kiana, and Roger felt a very dangerous aura from her. When I encountered such an aura when I checked into the hotel, I obviously didn't feel anything. It's her. Seeing Kiana and May next to her, Carp's pupils dilated slightly. After the disbandment of the Lox pirates, the Arthur pirates disappeared and were never seen on the seas again. Such a terrifying person was pressed by Carp in the deepest part of his heart, and he didn't want to think about it again. However, I didn't expect that at this moment, I would meet two of the Arthur pirates here. So are the other two also in this water city? Carp's face suddenly became a little ugly. It is necessary to report this matter to the Navy headquarters as soon as possible to take precautions. As time passed, the spatial fluctuations that spread throughout the water city gradually disappeared, but the spatial fluctuations around Kiana did become more and more violent. The violence made it impossible for Mei to stay by her side, and she retreated some distance. All eyes fell on Kiana. Spatial fluctuations surround the surroundings, as if Kiana existed in another time and space at this time, which made people look unreal. It reminds me of Edward Newgate. Feeling the power of space emanating from Kiana, Roger's eyes were heavy. Edward's mere possession of the power of shattered space is enough to shock people and become the supremacy of the seas. And now, Roger feels that Kiana has not only the power to shatter space, but control. You can control the space. As soon as such an idea came to him, Roger's eyes were full of horror. The spatial fluctuations surrounding Kiana quickly condensed, and then burst out violently. A pillar of light shot up into the dark clouds above. In this dark cloud, somewhat dimly lit space, this pillar of light became the only light. Bright, dazzling, dazzling. In the entire water capital, everyone's eyes were focused on this pillar of light. After more than 10 seconds, the pillar of light gradually shortened from top to bottom, and the shortened light became more and more dazzling. In the midst of this light, a figure gradually emerged. The body is suspended in the void, the long white hair fluttering in the wind behind the back, and the spear of the sub-sky behind it is ready to pierce everything. The slightly closed eyes opened, and the golden eyes were as calm as an abyss, full of indifference. At this moment, the law of emptiness has descended into another world.